Imagine yourself 5 years from now. You're sitting in your favourite spot. Maybe it's a coffee shop, maybe your own backyard. The sun hits your face just right. Your phone buzzes, but you don't rush to check it. You smile at something only you understand. You've learned the art of selective response, the beauty of chosen battles, the power of deliberate silence. But peace wasn't always this quiet. There was a time when every unanswered text felt like rejection, when every argument needed your defence, when every opinion about you required immediate correction. You lived in reaction mode, a puppet dancing to everyone else's strings, exhausted from performing for an audience that wasn't even watching. Something had to break. And eventually it did, not dramatically, not all at once. But slowly, quietly, you started understanding a truth that changed everything. Not every action requires your reaction. Not every provocation deserves your energy. Let's go back to where the silence began. To that first moment when you chose peace over proving a point. Because that's where your real story started. You know what's exhausting? Really, truly exhausting. It's not the work you do. It's not the responsibilities you carry. It's that constant need to explain yourself, to justify your choices, to make people understand your perspective when they've already decided who you are in their story. I learnt this the hard way. Spent years, and I mean years, crafting perfect responses to criticism, writing paragraphs to people who'd only read the first line, defending my character to those who'd already assassinated it over coffee with their friends. You know what all that effort got me? More arguments, more drama. More people who learn that if they push the right buttons, they get a show. See, there's something nobody tells you about constantly defending yourself. It actually makes you look guilty. The more you explain, the more desperate you seem. The louder you argue your innocence, the more people wonder what you're hiding. It's like quicksand. The harder you fight, the deeper you sink. But here's where it gets interesting. The day I stopped, everything changed. Not immediately, not obviously, but gradually, like watching the tide pull back, I started noticing something profound. The people who genuinely knew me, they never needed my defence in the first place. They'd already made up their minds about my character based on my actions, not someone else's words, and the ones who believed every rumour, every piece of gossip. Well, they were telling me something important too. They were showing me that my words would never be more powerful than their preconceived notions. My truth would never outweigh their need for drama. Think about your own life for a second. How many hours have you spent crafting the perfect comeback? How many sleepless nights rehearsing conversations that never happen? How much energy goes into proving yourself to people who, let's be honest, wouldn't believe you if you showed them video evidence? We do this because we're good people. We care about our reputation. We want to be understood, to be seen accurately. That's not weakness. That's human. But there's a difference between explaining yourself to someone who's genuinely confused and defending yourself to someone who's already convicted you. One seeks understanding. The other seeks entertainment. And once you learn to tell the difference, once you realise that your silence isn't admission but selection, that your energy is currency and you get to choose where to spend it, that's when the game changes completely. I remember the exact moment this clicked for me. Someone had spread a completely fabricated story about me. The old me would have called everyone involved, presented evidence, demanded retractions, but instead I did something revolutionary. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And you know what happened? The story died. Without my reaction to fuel it, without my defensive energy to validate it, it just faded. The people who mattered checked in with me directly. The ones who didn't? Well, they revealed themselves as people whose opinions never should have affected me anyway. That's where everything started to change, when I realised that my peace was worth more than their perception. When I understood that silence isn't empty, it's full of choice, full of power, full of all the words you're strong enough not to say. And from there, silence became my teacher. Not the silence of defeat or disconnection, but the silence of someone who finally understood which voices deserved a response and which ones deserved to hear nothing but the sound of my footsteps walking away. Let's talk about what's really happening when you feel that burning need to respond. That instant fire in your chest when someone misunderstands you, disrespects you, or worse, dismisses you entirely. Your brain is doing exactly what it's designed to do. It's protecting you, defending your identity, fighting for your place in the tribe. 200,000 years of evolution are screaming at you to react, to establish dominance, to make sure everyone knows exactly where you stand. But here's the problem with living by ancient instincts in a modern world. You're fighting battles that don't exist anymore. You're not defending your cave from invaders. You're defending your ego from strangers on the internet who forgot about you 3 seconds after posting their comment. Think about your last week. How many times did you feel that pull? Someone cuts you off in traffic. Your hand hovers over the horn. A co-worker takes credit for your idea. Your fingers itch to send that email. Your ex posts something clearly aimed at you. Suddenly, you're composing essays in your head at 1 a.m. Each reaction feels justified. Necessary even. If I don't say something, they'll think I'm weak. If I don't correct this, everyone will believe the lie. If I don't fight back, I lose. But do you? Really? Because here's what actually happens when you react to everything. You become predictable, controllable. People learn your buttons and they press them for entertainment. You become a performer in someone else's circus, dancing every time they play your song. And the exhaustion, pause, the exhaustion is real. It's not just mental, it's physical. Your body keeps score of every argument, every defensive stance, every time you had to prove yourself. Your shoulders carry the weight of explanations nobody asked for. Your jaw holds the tension of words you wish you hadn't said. You know what's wild? The people who trigger you the most, they're using maybe 2% of their energy to push your buttons. Meanwhile, you're spending 98% of yours responding. They throw a pebble, you launch a boulder. They whisper, you scream. And at the end of the day, they sleep soundly while you're up replaying conversations, perfecting comebacks for wars that already ended. The illusion is that responding gives you control. That if you can just explain yourself clearly enough, argue your point perfectly enough, show them the truth forcefully enough, then you win. But control isn't about having the last word. It's about choosing whether the conversation deserves your first word. Real control, the kind that actually changes your life, is recognizing that most provocations are invitations to chaos. And you? You have the power to decline that invitation every single time. When someone tries to pull you into their storm, you don't have to provide the wind. When they set a trap with their words, you don't have to walk into it just to prove you can fight your way out. Silence isn't weakness. Silence isn't surrender. Silence is you saying, I see your game and I choose not to play. It's you redirecting all that reactive energy into something that actually serves you. Building instead of battling. Creating instead of correcting. Moving forward instead of fighting to stay in the same place. And yes, at first it feels impossible. Everything in you wants to react. That's normal. That's human. But that's also why learning this changes everything. The first time you try to stay silent when everything in you wants to explode, it's torture. Pure, absolute torture. Your mind races with perfect responses. Your heart pounds like it's trying to escape your chest. That voice in your head, you know the one, it's screaming. Say something. Defend yourself. They can't talk to you like that. Show them who they're dealing with. And there you sit, jaw clenched, fists tight, using every ounce of willpower to do nothing. It feels like holding your breath underwater. Unnatural. Wrong, like you're betraying yourself. Let me paint you a picture. You're at work. Team meeting. Someone just threw you under the bus for a project delay that was actually their fault. Everyone's looking at you, waiting. The old you would have pulled out receipts, emails, timestamps, the whole forensic evidence package. But instead, you take a breath. You nod slightly. You say, I'll look into that, and you move on. The meeting ends. You're shaking. Not from fear, from restraint, from the effort it took to not defend yourself. Your colleague smirks, thinking they won. Others might think you're weak, that you had nothing to say. But here's what really happened in that room. You just showed everyone that you're not reactive, that you can't be baited, that your professionalism isn't dependent on other people's behaviour. And while they don't realise it yet, you just planted a seed. 2 weeks later, that same colleague tries the same move. But this time, the room's different. People remember. They saw who stayed calm and who needed to throw blame. They noticed who focused on solutions and who focused on deflection. Your silence spoke volumes about your character. Their noise spoke volumes about theirs. But I'm not going to lie to you and pretend it's easy. That voice in your head, it doesn't go away immediately. For weeks, maybe months, it'll keep pushing. It'll tell you stories about what people think, about respect you're losing, about battles you should be fighting. It'll wake you up at 3 a.m. with a perfect comeback to something that happened 3 days ago. It'll rehearse arguments in the shower. It'll compose emails you'll never send, text you'll type and delete, conversations that only exist in your imagination. You know what's happening? You're literally rewiring your brain. You're fighting against years, maybe decades, of conditioning. Every cell in your body has been trained to react, to defend, to engage. And now you're teaching it something completely different. It's like training a wild horse. At first it fights everything. It bucks, kicks, refuses to be tamed. Your ego is that horse. It's used to running wild, reacting to every sound, every movement, every perceived threat. But slowly, session by session, moment by moment, you teach it that not every sound is danger. Not every movement requires reaction. And here's the beautiful part. Each time you succeed, even for a few seconds, you get stronger. Each moment of restraint builds a muscle you didn't know you had. The voice gets quieter. The urge gets weaker. What felt impossible on day 1 feels merely difficult on day 30, and by day 100. It starts feeling like freedom, because restraint isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about choosing your battles with the wisdom of someone who finally understands that most battles aren't worth fighting. It's about recognizing that the energy you save by not engaging in petty conflicts is energy you can invest in things that actually matter. Your goals, your growth, your peace, your real relationships, the ones with people who don't require you to defend your every move. The restraint phase is temporary. The strength it builds is permanent. And once you push through this part, once you master that initial urge to react, that's when everything shifts. Then it happens, that moment. At first time when choosing silence doesn't feel like holding back. It feels like stepping up. For me, it was an argument I didn't have. Someone I cared about said something designed to hurt. The old me would have matched their energy, raised them one, turned it into a war where nobody wins but everybody bleeds. But instead, I looked at them, really looked at them, and saw something I'd never noticed before. Pain. Their own pain, using me as a punching bag for battles I didn't start. So I said nothing, not the cold, punishing nothing of the silent treatment, but the warm nothing of understanding, the compassionate nothing of, I see you're hurting and I won't make it worse. They kept pushing, waiting for the explosion, but it never came. And in that space where my anger should have been, something else appeared. Clarity. For the first time, I could see the whole situation without my ego clouding the view. This person didn't need my comeback. They needed my absence from their chaos. They were drowning and trying to pull me under, not because they hated me, but because drowning people grab onto anything. And by not reacting, I stayed on shore, safe, dry, able to throw them a rope when they were ready, instead of jumping in and drowning together. That's the moment everything changes, when you realise silence isn't about them at all. It's about you maintaining your position, your peace, your perspective. It's about seeing situations for what they really are, not what your triggered emotions tell you they are. You start noticing things you missed before, like how most arguments aren't about the present moment. They're about old wounds. How most disrespect isn't personal, it's projection. How most people who try to trigger you are just hoping you'll join them in their misery, because misery loves company, but company doesn't have to accept the invitation. There's this moment of almost amusement. You watch someone try to pull you into drama, and instead of feeling attacked, you feel aware. Like watching a child throw a tantrum. You don't join the tantrum. You don't argue with it. You just wait for it to pass. But here's what really marks the turning point. You stop seeing silence as losing. You start seeing it as choosing. Choosing your peace over their provocation. Choosing your energy over their entertainment. Choosing your growth over their games. The first time this clicks, really clicks, you feel something shift in your chest. Like a door closing on an old version of you. The version that needed to prove, to defend, to convince. And a new door opening to someone who understands that the most powerful position in any conflict is often above it, not in it. You realize that every time you don't react to disrespect, you're not letting them win. You're refusing to let them make you lose yourself. Every time you choose silence over argument, you're not being weak, you're being selective. Every time you walk away from a fight, you're not running, you're choosing your direction. And this shift is not just mental. You feel it physically. Your shoulders drop. Your jaw unclenches. That constant alertness, that readiness for battle, it starts to fade. You're not walking through life with your fists up anymore. You're walking through it with your head clear. People notice, not immediately, but they notice. You become the person who doesn't get rattled, the one who stays steady when everything's shaking, the one who brings calm to chaos instead of adding to it. But more importantly, you notice how much energy you have when you're not spending it on defense. You notice how much clearer you think when you're not clouded by conflict. You notice how much easier you breathe when you're not holding your breath for the next battle. This is the turning point. Not where you become perfect at silence, but where you finally understand its value. Where you stop seeing it as something you have to do and start seeing it as something you get to choose. And choice? That changes everything. Now we get to the real work. Because choosing silence once is powerful, but building it into who you are, that requires something deeper. That requires rewiring your emotional operating system. See, emotions are like waves. They rise, they peak, they crash. The untrained mind surfs every wave, rides every emotion to its conclusion. Anger says jump, you jump. Hurt says lash out, you lash out. Fear says defend, you defend. But discipline, real emotional discipline, is learning to watch the waves without riding them. To feel the pull without following it. To acknowledge the emotion without becoming it. This isn't about suppressing feelings. Let me be clear about that. Suppression is just delayed explosion. It's pushing everything down until one day you detonate over something tiny, leaving everyone confused why you're having a breakdown over a spilled coffee. No, this is about something much more sophisticated. It's about creating space between feeling and action, between trigger and response. It's about developing what I call the sacred pause. That moment when someone insults you and your body floods with adrenaline, that's natural, that's human. But what you do in the next 3 seconds, that's discipline, that's choice, that's where your power lives. Think of it like training for a marathon. You don't just wake up one day and run 26 miles. You build stamina, you strengthen muscles. You teach your body to handle discomfort without quitting. Emotional discipline works the same way. Every time you feel triggered but choose to breathe instead of react, you're doing a rep. Every time you write that angry text but delete it instead of sending, that's a rep. Every time you let someone have the last word, even though you have the perfect comeback, another rep. And just like physical training, it hurts at first. Your ego screams like an untrained muscle. Your pride cramps up. Your need for validation begs you to stop, but you keep going. Because you know that on the other side of this discomfort is strength most people never develop. Here's a practice that changed my life. When I feel that emotional surge, that need to react, I ask myself 3 questions. First, will this matter in 3 days? Second, is my response going to change anything? Third, am I reacting to the present situation or to something this reminds me of? 9 times out of 10, at least one answer tells me to stay quiet, because most things that feel urgent aren't important. Most responses don't change outcomes, just create new problems. And most triggers are just echoes of old wounds being poked. But here's the advanced level. Emotional control isn't just about managing negative emotions. It's also about not being controlled by positive ones. Not every opportunity needs to be seized. Not every compliment needs a response. Not every open door needs to be walked through. The person who reacts to everything, good or bad, is still reactive. Still controlled by external forces. Still dancing to someone else's rhythm. True emotional control means you respond based on your values, your goals, your chosen direction, not based on what emotions are flowing through you at any given moment. You know what this looks like in real life? It's the executive who receives harsh criticism in a meeting and says, "I'll reflect on that," then actually does. It's the parent who doesn't match their teenager's emotional chaos but stays steady, becoming the anchor instead of another storm. It's the partner who, during an argument, says, "I need some time to think about this," and actually uses that time to think, not to build ammunition. These people aren't cold. They're not disconnected. They're actually more connected to themselves, to their values, to what really matters. They've learned that emotional control isn't about feeling less. It's about choosing which feelings get to drive the car. And when you develop this discipline, when you build this emotional fitness, something remarkable happens. Situations that used to trigger you become almost neutral. Someone's disrespect becomes just information about them, not an attack on you. Someone's opinion becomes just their perspective, not your reality. Someone's attempt to provoke becomes almost boring, like watching someone perform a magic trick you already know. This is mental fitness. This is emotional maturity. This is the foundation that makes everything else possible. Because when you master your internal world, the external world loses its power to control you. Okay, let's talk about the part nobody mentions. The cold side of silence. The price you pay for peace. Because if I'm being real with you, and I am, this journey gets lonely. When you stop engaging in drama, you might lose some people. When you stop feeding conflicts, certain relationships starve. When you refuse to play games, some players leave the table. And for a while, maybe a long while, it feels like you're standing in an empty room wondering if you made the right choice. I remember nights when my phone stopped buzzing. Not because I was at peace, but because I stopped being entertainment. The people who used to call me with their chaos found someone else to perform for them. The ones who loved to debate found someone else to argue with. The crowd that thrived on reaction found someone more reactive. And I sat there, in my newfound silence, wondering if I'd gone too far. If I'd become cold, disconnected. If, in trying to protect my peace, I'd built walls so high that nothing could get in, not even the good stuff. This is resistance. This is your old life testing your new boundaries. This is everyone who benefited from your reactivity trying to pull you back. They'll say you've changed, and they're right. They'll say you're distant, and maybe you are. They'll try to trigger the old you with phrases like, "You think you're better than us now." And part of you, the part that still needs to belong, will want to prove them wrong. To show them you're still the same. To react just once, just to keep the connection. But here's what I learned in that loneliness. It's not empty, it's full. Full of space for the right people. Full of energy for real connections. Full of room for relationships that don't require you to perform, to prove, to provide drama. The loneliness is temporary. It's the space between letting go of what wasn't serving you and finding what will. It's like clearing out your closet. For a moment, it looks empty, but that's only because you're making room for things that actually fit. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, new people appear. People who appreciate your calm, who value your peace, who don't need your reaction to feel connected to you. These relationships feel different, quieter maybe, but deeper, less intense, but more genuine, less dramatic, but more durable. You realise that what you thought was connection was often just mutual dysfunction. What felt like friendship was sometimes just shared chaos. What seemed like love was frequently just intensity addiction. Real connection doesn't require constant reaction. Real friendship doesn't need drama to survive. Real love doesn't feed on conflict. These relationships exist in peace, grow in stability, thrive in the very silence that killed the toxic ones. But I won't lie to you, the transition is hard. There are days when you'll miss the chaos, the way ex-smokers miss cigarettes. Not because it was good for you, but because it was familiar. Because, at least in the drama, you knew your role. In peace, you have to figure out who you are without the performance. Some people never push through this phase. They get to the loneliness, feel the resistance, and retreat back to their old patterns. They choose familiar dysfunction over unfamiliar peace. And I understand that. I really do. Because standing in that space between who you were and who you're becoming, it takes courage most people don't know they have. But if you can hold on, if you can sit with the discomfort of that transition, if you can trust that the emptiness is just space waiting to be filled with something better, everything changes. The loneliness transforms into solitude. The resistance weakens into acceptance. The people who matter find their way to you, and the ones who don't fade into background noise. You stop missing the chaos because you finally understand what you were really missing, yourself. The real you, not the reactive you. The peaceful you, not the performing you. And when you get to the other side of this resistance, when you push through the loneliness, you discover something beautiful. You're not alone. You're just finally in the right company. Starting with your own. Then something interesting happens. Without any announcement, without any grand gesture, the world around you begins to shift. Not because the world changed, because your response to it did. It starts small. That co-worker who used to push your buttons. They try their usual tactics, but something's different. You don't bite. You don't engage. You just nod, maybe smile slightly, and continue with your work. They try again, harder this time. Still nothing. By the third attempt, they look almost confused, like a comedian whose punchline fell flat. Within weeks, they stop. Not because you fought them, because you didn't. There's no fun in pushing buttons that don't work. No satisfaction in provoking someone who won't be provoked. You became boring to them, and that's the greatest victory of all. But here's where it gets really interesting. Other people start noticing. In meetings, you become the steady one. When everyone's arguing, you're thinking. When others are reacting, you're observing. When the room fills with emotional chaos, you become the eye of the storm. Leaders notice this. Real leaders, not just people with titles. They start putting you into important conversations. Why? Because you can be trusted not to escalate. You bring solutions, not more problems. You lower the temperature instead of raising it. I had a friend who applied this to her marriage. For years, every discussion became an argument. Every disagreement became a battle. Then she started choosing silence, not the cold, punishing kind, but the thoughtful, intentional kind. When her partner tried to escalate, she'd say, "Let me think about that." And she would, really think. Not plan counterattacks, but actually consider their perspective. 3 months later, her partner said something that stopped her cold. "You don't fight fair anymore." When she asked what he meant, he said, "You don't fight at all. You just listen." And now I hear myself more. I don't always like what I'm saying. That's the shift. When you stop playing the game, other people have to notice they're playing alone. When you stop joining the chaos, they have to face their own noise. When you refuse to be triggered, they have to examine why they're trying to trigger you. Your relationships begin to sort themselves. The healthy ones grow stronger because there's no drama clouding them. The toxic ones reveal themselves because they can't survive without conflict. The mediocre ones either evolve or dissolve. At work, You become known as the professional, the reliable one, the one who focuses on solutions, not problems, the one who doesn't get pulled into office politics. Promotions come not because you fought for them, but because you didn't waste energy fighting about everything else. In your personal life, you attract different people. People who value peace over drama, depth over intensity, consistency over chaos. Your social circle might get smaller, but it gets richer. Quality replaces quantity. Real replaces reactive. You know what's really happening? You're changing the energy you put into the world. And the world has no choice but to respond to that new energy. It's like changing the channel. You stop broadcasting on the drama frequency, so you stop attracting drama enthusiasts. Even strangers respond differently. Customer service becomes easier because you're calm. Traffic feels less stressful because you're not fighting it. Daily frustrations lose their power because you stop giving them your energy. People start coming to you for advice, not because you proclaimed yourself wise, but because wisdom is evident in how you handle yourself. They see your peace and want to know the secret. They watch your stability and wonder how you built it. And the beautiful irony, the respect you used to fight for, the validation you used to demand, the acknowledgement you used to chase, it all comes naturally now. Not because you're demanding it, but because you're demonstrating something more valuable: self-control, self-respect, self-sufficiency. The world starts treating you differently because you treat yourself differently. You teach people how to treat you not through words, but through standards. Not through demands, but through demonstration. Not through fighting, but through being someone who doesn't need to fight. Now you enter a different state of being. You become the observer of your own life. Not disconnected, not indifferent, but present in a way most people never experience. It's like you've been in the middle of a hurricane your whole life, spinning with the chaos, and suddenly you step into the eye. Everything's still moving around you, but you're still. You can see it all, the patterns, the cycles, the cause and effect that was invisible when you were spinning too. You start noticing things. How most arguments follow the same script. How most people's triggers are just their old wounds in disguise. How most conflicts are just two people's pain colliding, creating more pain, solving nothing. Think about it. Really think. How many of your past arguments actually resolved anything? How many times did reacting emotionally make the situation better? How many relationships improved because you had the last word? When you become the observer, you see the futility of most reactions. You watch people exhaust themselves fighting battles that don't matter, with people who won't remember, about things that won't last. You see yourself in them, the old you, spending precious energy on temporary problems. But observation isn't judgment. It's understanding. You don't look down on people still caught in the cycle. You remember being there. You understand the pull, the addiction to reaction, the false sense of control it provides. Instead, you become curious. Why does this person need conflict? What pain are they avoiding? What are they really asking for when they provoke? When you observe instead of react, you start seeing the hurt behind the harsh words, the fear behind the aggression, the loneliness behind the anger. This changes how you see everything. Road rage becomes someone having a terrible day. Workplace hostility becomes someone feeling threatened. Family drama becomes generations of unhealed wounds playing out. You still see the behaviour, but now you see what's driving it. And this perspective gives you choices. When someone attacks, you can see it's not about you, it's about them. When someone tries to trigger you, you can recognise they're really showing you their triggers. When someone disrespects you, you understand they're revealing their relationship with themselves. From this position of observation, you develop what I call selective engagement. You choose when to speak, not from emotion, but from wisdom. You respond not from trigger, but from intention. You engage not from reaction, but from decision. Sometimes you'll still choose to speak up, but now it's strategic, not reactive. You address things that matter, ignore things that don't. You have hard conversations when they'll create progress, not when you just need to be right. You become fascinated by your own patterns too. You observe your triggers without judgment. Notice your impulses without following them. Watch your emotions rise and fall like weather. Sometimes storms, sometimes sunshine, but always temporary. This self-observation is freedom, because when you can watch yourself think, feel, react, without being controlled by any of it, you finally understand what true power is. It's not controlling others. It's not winning arguments. It's not having the last word. It's being uncontrollable, unpredictable to those who try to manipulate, stable in instability, calm in chaos, present in the moment without being prisoner to it. You become like water. Someone throws a stone, you ripple and return to calm. Someone tries to grasp you, you flow around them. Someone attempts to break you, you adapt, reshape, continue. And from this place of observation, you make better decisions. You see opportunities others miss because they're too busy reacting. You avoid problems others create because you saw them coming. You build while others battle. You grow while others grab. The observer sees what the reactor misses, that most of life's drama is optional. That peace is always available, just one choice away. That silence isn't empty space, but space full of possibility. Think about where you are right now, listening to this. Part of you is already becoming the observer, watching your own resistance, noticing your own triggers, seeing your patterns. That awareness, that's where change begins. Section 8, Mastery of Stillness. And here we arrive at mastery. Not perfection, mastery. The difference matters. Perfection is rigid, impossible, a myth that keeps you chasing. Mastery is fluid, achievable, a practice that keeps you growing. Mastery of stillness doesn't mean you never react. It means when you do, it's a choice, not a reflex. It means you develop such deep stability that external chaos can't shake your internal peace. It means you found your center and learned to live from it. This is emotional independence. You no longer need others to behave a certain way for you to feel okay. You don't require anyone's approval to know your worth. You don't need the last word to know you're right. You don't need to win arguments to feel victorious. You've transcended the game most people don't even know they're playing. The game of reaction and counter-reaction, of trigger and response, of emotional ping-pong, where nobody wins, but everybody's exhausted. Freedom. That's what this is. Freedom from other people's chaos. Freedom from your own reactive patterns. Freedom to choose your response to everything life throws at you. And that freedom? It's intoxicating. It's the kind of power people spend their whole lives seeking in all the wrong places. You know what mastery looks like in everyday life? It's receiving criticism and genuinely considering if there's truth in it without your ego getting involved. Is someone trying to hurt you with words and you feeling compassion for their pain? It's chaos erupting around you and you remaining the calm center that others gravitate toward. It's your ex trying to trigger you and you wishing them well, genuinely. It's your boss being unreasonable and you seeing their pressure, not taking their projection. It's your family pushing old buttons that no longer work and you loving them anyway, from a peaceful distance if necessary. But here's what really defines mastery. You stop seeing silence as a technique and start recognizing it as who you are. You're not practicing stillness anymore. You are stillness. You don't choose peace. You embody it. The noise of the world becomes like background music, present but not controlling, there but not demanding. You hear it all, the criticism, the chaos, the calls for reaction, but it doesn't penetrate your core. It just flows around you like the wind around a mountain. People feel this when they're near you. Your presence calms rooms. Your stability grounds others. Your peace becomes contagious. You become the person others come to when their world is falling apart, not because you'll fix it, but because being near you reminds them that stillness exists. And the universe responds to this mastery in ways that seem almost magical. Opportunities appear because you're calm enough to see them. Solutions emerge because you're quiet enough to hear them. The right people find you because you're no longer hidden behind walls of reaction. You realize silence was never about being quiet. It was about being clear. Clear in your values, clear in your direction, clear in your energy, clear in who deserves access to you. Silence isn't the absence of power, it is power. The power to choose, the power to direct your energy, the power to protect your peace, the power to build instead of battle, the power to respond instead of react, the power to live intentionally instead of impulsively. You understand now that every word you don't say in anger is strength. Every argument you don't engage in is wisdom. Every trigger you don't follow is growth. Every moment of chosen silence is a declaration of independence from everything trying to control you. This mastery, this stillness, this power, it's not about becoming someone different. It's about finally becoming who you always were, beneath all the noise, all the reaction, all the performance. It's about coming home to yourself. And in that homecoming, in that return to your true nature, in that embrace of your inherent stillness, that's when silence finally speaks louder than anything else.